Well, it is 107 days until America will vote for its next president in what could be one of the most important policy-based elections in history. My next guest knows what it takes to win the White House. He helped lead Donald Trump to victory in 2016 as the chief executive of his campaign. Joining me right now is once again former White House chief strategist, host of War Room Pandemic, Steve Bannon. Steve, it is great to see you this morning. Thanks for being here. We want to roll out these polls this morning from Fox News and get your take on all of this, because once again, we see the president lagging. What do you think is going on? Here is President Trump on the economy. 47% approve, 47% disapprove, Steve. And then you've got other polls which show the president lagging Joe Biden. Your take?
Listen, when you go back and look I think it was in March, 51% of the American people thought President Trump was doing a good job, a solid job in leadership on this pandemic. I think in the poll it's 37, 38%, something like this. This is about just bold action and bold leadership. What I think the president should do, my recommendation would be, every day start to have the top people around you, Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, the vice president, Dr. Redfield at CDC, Chief of Staff Meadows, have them in the Oval, get briefed every day on an action plan, just drive action, 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 and do it through action, urgency, and focus. And, you know, get a plan for masks, you know, get a plan for the schools, bring the governors in. But with those 5 people around the desk, and then every couple of days you bring the media in and you tell them what the plan of the day is. You tell them where we're driving action. President Trump's a man of action. When he's taken action on whether shutting down China, shutting down Europe, declaring this a national emergency, when President Trump's taken action, the polls reflect that. So I think the poll should be an indication to people in the White House that, hey, you're in the driver's seat here. Just go back to the plan you've got. And also, you've made a decision about federalism. I think it's very smart. But include the governors now, particularly as, you know, this kind of weaponized virus, you know, is impervious to summer heat and humidity. It also is asymptomatic. It also targets, it looks like it targets the most vulnerable. And so this is where they have to have, I think, targeted interventions. I think Dr. Birx has talked about this in the past. The White House has all the elements. I think it's just bring it together around President Trump in a principles only, and every couple of days bring the media in there and let President Trump explain what action he's taken. Not one of these 2-hour press conferences where the media can throw out all these other questions, but focus on the pandemic. If you focus on the pandemic, you'll start to make real progress in that. And I think the polls will all start to fall in place. Remember, the CCP lied. Americans died. I think the president can take leadership in this and drive this, and I think the polls will take care of themselves.
What can you say about Joe Biden's plans right now, Steve? This week, the former vice president unveiled a climate plan to cost $2 trillion. Look, he is going to be raising taxes. He's already discussed that he's going to be raising taxes. If Elizabeth Warren is his running mate or not, she could be Treasury Secretary, but she will certainly be an important key voice in the economy. She wants to institute a wealth tax. You know, look, we are facing a $22 trillion debt, and you would say, okay, you have to raise taxes in that regard, but he's using that higher revenue to come up with things like a $2 trillion green plan. What's your take on Biden's agenda?
Look, Biden doesn't know what his agenda is. He's trying to reinvent himself every day. He goes up to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and makes this kind of populist economic nationalist speech. He's really the concierge of Wilmington, Delaware, which is the headquarters of all the global corporations. You know, Joe Biden, to me, has to come forward to the American people and tell what his plan on China is. The president's kind of war council has laid out the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse against the Chinese Communist Party: the National Security Advisor, head of the FBI, the Secretary of State, and then obviously Attorney General Barr in that magnificent speech. Those 4 individuals laid out an integrated and coherent war plan to confront the Chinese Communist Party on technological and information war and economic war, and then with our allies start to open up the South China Sea and support our allies in India on the border of Chinese-occupied Tibet. You're seeing an integrated war plan put together to confront first and then take down the Chinese Communist Party, to call their bluff. And Joe Biden, in his entire speech the other day on economics, mentioned China, I think, one time, talking about electric vehicles. Joe Biden is the candidate of globalization. He's a total globalist. He has kowtowed to the Chinese Communist Party. The president has a coherent plan against the Chinese Communist Party. I would like the Secretary of Treasury to join in there and Treasury to start to drop the hammer. But you've seen a coherent war plan. I think you've just got to get that same level of coherence on the Chinese virus that's here, the CCP virus that has come to the United States. And I think if you do that, things will come together. And I don't think Joe Biden has an answer. So far, it's been virtually incoherent.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to the China story in a second. But who do you think Joe Biden will choose as his vice presidential candidate?
Well, I think the polling internal to Biden, I think the number one thing they're looking at is somebody that can't throw him off the where he's going right now. So I think whether it's Elizabeth Warren, Kamala Harris, I think they're looking at a number of candidates. I don't think it's going to matter at the end of the day who his VP is, because really I think Joe Biden's the one that's going to get smoked out. If President Trump continues to drive action, that Biden's going to be smoked out and going to have to really confront President Trump on the hustings, you know, and I just don't think he's going to stand up. Right now, remember, nothing he puts forward is really coherent, and he's trying to reform himself rebrand himself as a populist and economic nationalist against 45 years of his track record. It's going to be very, very difficult as the Trump campaign, as a full force multi